In 1954, the CIA overthrew the elected government of Guatemala. The operation was not triggered by a military threat. It was triggered by a land reform law that threatened the profit margins of a fruit company. The company had already written the press release. By 1950, United Fruit Company controlled more land in Guatemala than any other single entity, approximately 42% of the country's total arable land. Its infrastructure dwarfed the Guatemalan state itself. The company owned the only Atlantic Railroad, the only Caribbean port at Puerto Barrios, and the telegraph lines that ran alongside the tracks. If you wanted to move goods from the interior to the outside world, you paid United Fruit a toll. The Guatemalan government called this arrangement by its proper name, a monopoly. United Fruit's shareholders called it a business model. The company had operated this way since 1901, when it received its first land concession from a Guatemalan dictator named Manuel Estrada Cabrera in exchange for building a postal railway. That original concession included a provision exempting United Fruit from import duties and most forms of taxation. Over the following 5 decades, the company renewed and expanded those exemptions through a succession of compliant governments, paying the state a flat export fee of 1.5 cents per stem of bananas, regardless of the market price. When banana prices rose, United Fruit kept the difference. When banana prices fell, Guatemala absorbed the loss. In 1950, Jacobo Arbenz was elected president of Guatemala with 65% of the vote. He was a former Army colonel, the son of a Swiss-German pharmacist, and a graduate of Guatemala's National Military Academy. His platform was not radical by the standards of his time or region. He proposed land redistribution, a capital gains tax, and the construction of a state-owned port to break United Fruit's monopoly at Puerto Barrios. In 1952, his government passed Decree 900, the Agrarian Reform Law. The law authorized the expropriation of uncultivated land from large estates. Landowners would be compensated at the value they had declared on their own tax returns. United Fruit had declared its uncultivated Guatemalan holdings at $627,572. The Arbenz government offered exactly that. United Fruit responded by claiming the land was actually worth $15,854,849, 25 times what it had told the tax authority. That gap between what a company reported to avoid taxes and what it demanded when the bill came due is where the story begins. Because closing that gap required more than lawyers. It required a story, and United Fruit already knew exactly who to hire to tell it. Decree 900 was not a revolutionary document. Signed by Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz on June 17, 1952, it was an agrarian reform law modeled almost exactly on the agricultural policies Franklin Roosevelt had implemented in the American South 2 decades earlier. It targeted only uncultivated land. It offered compensation. The government of Guatemala valued United Fruit Company's idle acreage at $627,572. The precise figure United Fruit itself had declared to Guatemalan tax authorities to minimize its own tax burden. United Fruit responded by demanding $15,854,149. The gap between those two numbers is where the coup was born. United Fruit retained Edward Bernays in 1950. Bernays had already written the book, literally. His 1928 text Propaganda outlined how manufactured public opinion could be made to feel like democratic consensus. For United Fruit, he built a media architecture from nothing. He invited American journalists on paid trips to Guatemala, pre-written with talking points. He placed stories in the New York Times, the New York Herald Tribune, Time magazine. He coined the phrase Banana Republic not as critique, but as containment, a way to make Guatemalan sovereignty sound inherently absurd. By 1953, the internal United Fruit communications, now declassified and held at Harvard Business School's Baker Library, show the company explicitly tracking which journalists had run favorable coverage and which needed additional cultivation. This was not lobbying. It was information warfare conducted against the American public on behalf of a fruit company's balance sheet. The CIA directorate that received United Fruit's messaging was not a neutral audience. CIA Director Allen Dulles had previously served on United Fruit's board. His brother John Foster Dulles, serving as Secretary of State under Eisenhower, had worked as a legal counsel for the company at the Sullivan and Cromwell law firm. Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs John Moores Cabot owned United Fruit stock. These were not coincidences compiled after the fact. They are documented in Senate confirmation records, financial disclosure filings, and State Department personnel files. Operation PBSUCCESS was formally authorized by President Eisenhower on August 12, 1953, with a budget of $2.7 million. The paperwork authorizing it described Guatemala as a Soviet beachhead in the Western Hemisphere. No Soviet weapons, advisors, or treaty obligations were ever documented inside Guatemalan borders. The communist threat was the Bernays memo given a classification stamp. On June 18, 1954, CIA-trained forces crossed into Guatemala from Honduras. CIA radio station, Voice of Liberation, broadcast fabricated military victories across the country, creating the psychological impression of a collapsing government. Arbenz, unable to confirm what was real, unable to trust an officer corps that the CIA had spent months quietly suborning, resigned on June 27, 1954. He handed power to a military junta in a radio address heard across Guatemala City. Within weeks, Colonel Carlos Castillo Armas, the CIA's chosen replacement, canceled Decree 900. Every acre redistributed to Guatemalan peasant farmers was returned to United Fruit. The 500,000 rural workers who had received land titles watched those titles legally voided. No compensation, no appeal, no court that would hear them. What no internal United Fruit document, no CIA after-action report, and no State Department cable from 1954 recorded was the terminal consequence of what had been set in motion. Castillo Armas established a committee against communism with authority to arrest without charge. The list of suspected communists included teachers, labor organizers, and village leaders who had simply registered land claims under Decree 900. By 1966, the Guatemalan security forces, trained and funded through the U.S. Military Assistance Program, began conducting mass disappearances. The civil war that followed ran for 36 years. The United Nations-sponsored Commission for Historical Clarification documented 200,000 dead by 1999, with 93% of verified atrocities attributed to state security forces. That number, $200,000, traces a direct line back to a fruit company's tax assessment, a public relations contract signed in 1950, and a document authorizing $2.7 million to remove an elected government that had dared to read the fine print. No congressional hearing was ever convened to examine what United Fruit Company and the CIA did to Guatemala in 1954. Operation PBSUCCESS was classified for decades. Edward Bernays retired comfortably to Cambridge, Massachusetts, collecting awards for his contributions to public relations. The CIA officers who ran the coup were promoted. Allen Dulles, CIA director and former United Fruit board member, faced no investigation. His brother John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State and former United Fruit legal counsel, died in office in 1959, honored. The Guatemalan officers installed by the operation initiated 40 years of military dictatorship. Estimates place the death toll from the subsequent civil conflict at over 200,000 people, the majority indigenous Maya civilians. A United Nations-backed Truth Commission in 1999 concluded that genocide had occurred. It named the state. It did not name the corporation. No executive was charged. No shareholder was penalized. United Fruit rebranded as Chiquita Brands International in 1970. In 2001, Chiquita quietly admitted in SEC filings to paying $3 million to a designated terrorist organization in Colombia to protect its operations there. It paid a $25 million fine. It did not cease operations. The banana is still on the shelf. The land that Jacobo Arbenz redistributed to 200,000 Guatemalan farmers was returned to United Fruit within weeks of the coup. Arbenz died in exile in 1971, in a bathtub in Mexico City. The farmers received nothing. The 1952 Guatemalan land reform law that triggered all of this offered United Fruit compensation based on the company's own declared land value for tax purposes. United Fruit had declared that value at one point $17 per acre. When they demanded compensation after the coup, they claimed the land was worth $75 per acre. The documents showing both figures exist in the Guatemalan National Archive and in declassified U.S. State Department cables. The valuation was a lie the company maintained simultaneously in two different directions, and everyone in Washington who needed to know knew. The architecture that made this possible: a corporation purchasing access to government officials, hiring a communications firm to manufacture public consensus, and using a foreign policy apparatus as a private security force, was not dismantled after Guatemala. It was studied. It was refined. The legal structures that allow corporations to fund think tanks, lobby agencies, place former executives inside regulatory bodies, and shape the framing of foreign policy debates remain intact and active today. What happened in Guatemala in 1954 was not an anomaly. It was a proof of concept. The declassified files are public. The system they documented is still running. What we want to know is this: when a government acts in a corporation's interest while calling it national security, where does policy end and contract killing begin? Drop your answer in the comments. If this kind of documented history is what you want more of, subscribe now, because every week we expose another system they hoped you would never understand.